The laboratory was hidden deep beneath the Nevada desert, a place where sunlight never reached and silence reigned unless interrupted by the hum of machinery. It was a facility designed for secrets, its walls lined with reinforced steel and its corridors illuminated by cold, white lights. Inside one of the rooms, a team of scientists gathered around a bank of monitors, their faces tense with anticipation. At the center of their focus stood Carter, a man chosen not for his extraordinary skills, but for something far more basic, his humanity. Wasn't sure why he had been selected for this experiment. All he knew was that he had signed up for what he thought would be a routine psychological study. He was told it involved observing human behavior under controlled conditions, nothing too dangerous or invasive. But as he sat in the waiting area, dressed in simple gray scrubs and sipping water from a plastic cup, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this place felt off. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and the way the scientists whispered among themselves made him uneasy. When they finally called his name, followed a young woman named Miller into a large chamber filled with equipment. She gave him a reassuring smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. "This won't take long," she said, guiding him toward a metal door marked with a red warning sign. "Just step inside and we'll begin." Inside the chamber, found himself standing in what appeared to be a forest clearing. The trees were tall and dense, their leaves rustling softly in an artificial breeze. A faint orange glow painted the sky, mimicking the last light of a setting sun. For a moment, forgot he was underground. The illusion was so perfect that he could almost smell the earthy scent of the forest floor. Then he noticed something cradled in his arms, a small creature resembling a cross between a fox and a domestic cat. Its fur was soft and warm, and its round eyes blinked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and trust. "What is this?" asked aloud, glancing around for someone to explain. There was no response. Instead, he heard a voice crackle through hidden speakers. "Please remain calm, Mr. Carter. This is part of the test." Before could ask any more questions, the cub began to squirm slightly in his arms. Instinctively, he adjusted his grip, holding it closer to his chest. That's when he noticed the bottle in his other hand. It was filled with milk, and the cub immediately latched onto the nipple, suckling contentedly. Frowned, unsure whether to feel amused or annoyed. Was this some kind of joke? Why was he here playing babysitter to a strange animal? As if reading his thoughts, the voice returned. "Your task is simple, Mr. Carter. Protect the cub at all costs. Do you understand?" "Protect it from what?" replied, his voice tinged with skepticism. Again, there was no answer. The only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Sighed and looked down at the cub. Despite his confusion, he couldn't deny that it was adorable. Its tiny body radiated warmth, and the rhythmic motion of its drinking had a strangely calming effect on him. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all, he thought. But then the atmosphere changed. The soft rustling grew louder, sharper. Shadows moved across the edges of the clearing, darker and more menacing than before. His heart rate quickened as he scanned the tree line, trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. Something was out there, watching him. He could feel it. From behind a cluster of bushes came a low, guttural growl. Tightened his hold on the cub, his muscles tensing as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Whatever was lurking in the shadows wasn't friendly. Slowly, he backed away, keeping the cub pressed firmly against his chest. His free hand instinctively reached for the nearest object, a sturdy branch lying on the ground. He gripped it tightly, ready to defend himself if necessary. The growl intensified, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against bark. His breath hitched as a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the darkness. They belonged to a massive predator, a monstrous hybrid creature engineered specifically for this experiment. Its sleek black fur shimmered in the dim light, and its razor-sharp teeth gleamed like shards of glass. The beast prowled forward, its movements fluid and deliberate, every step bringing it closer to and the cub. For a split second considered running, but where would he go? The clearing was surrounded by thick vegetation, offering no clear escape route. Besides, he couldn't abandon the cub, Not now, not when it depended on him. Taking a deep breath, planted his feet firmly on the ground and raised the branch like a weapon. If this thing wanted a fight, he was prepared to give it one. The predator lunged suddenly, its powerful jaws snapping shut mere inches from his face. He swung the branch with all his might, striking the creature squarely on the snout. It let out a pained yelp and retreated momentarily, giving just enough time to reassess his position. He shifted the cub slightly, ensuring it remained secure in his arms while still maintaining a firm grip on the bottle of milk. Spilling it wasn't an option. Somehow, he knew that much. Back in the control room, Dr. Helen Grant leaned forward in her chair, her eyes glued to the monitors. Beside her, Daniel Brooks scribbled notes furiously, documenting every detail of his actions. "Fascinating," Dr. Grant murmured, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. "He's adapting faster than I expected." Daniel nodded, though his expression was less enthusiastic. "It's impressive, yes, but isn't this pushing him too far? What if he gets hurt?" Dr. Grant waved off his concerns. "We need to see how far human protective instincts can go. This is science, Daniel. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." Didn't know about the debate happening above him. All he knew was that the predator was circling again, its glowing eyes fixed on him with predatory intent. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he braced himself for another attack. When it came, he was ready. With a roar of defiance, swung the branch once more, this time aiming for the creature's legs. The blow landed true, causing the beast to stumble and collapse to the ground. Breathing heavily, took a cautious step back, his gaze never leaving the fallen predator. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but he doubted it would stay down for long. And even if it did, he had no idea what other dangers might lurk in the shadows. One thing was certain, protecting the cub wouldn't be easy. But as he glanced down at the tiny creature nestled safely in his arms, he realized something important. No matter what happened next, he wouldn't let anything or anyone harm it. The clearing was eerily quiet after his first encounter with the predator. The massive hybrid creature lay motionless on the ground, its glowing eyes dimmed and its breathing shallow. For a moment, allowed himself to relax, lowering the branch slightly as he caught his breath. His arms ached from holding both the cub and the makeshift weapon, but he didn't dare put either down. The cub continued to drink from the bottle, seemingly oblivious to the danger that had just passed. Glanced at it, his lips curling into a faint smile despite the chaos swirling around him. But the silence didn't last long. From the tree line came the sound of rustling leaves, louder and more aggressive than before. His heart sank as he realized the fight wasn't over. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his head toward the source of the noise. What he saw made his blood run cold. More predators emerged from the shadows, their sleek black forms blending seamlessly with the darkness of the forest. There were 3 of them now, each one larger and more menacing than the last. Their glowing eyes locked onto and the cub, their low growls reverberating through the air like a death knell. Tightened his grip on the branch, his mind racing. How was he supposed to defend himself against not 1 but 4 of these creatures? And how could he possibly keep the cub safe? For a brief moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. His legs felt weak, his chest tight. But then the cub shifted slightly in his arms, letting out a soft whimper. The sound snapped back to reality. He couldn't afford to fall apart, not now, not when this tiny creature depended on him. Swallowing hard, he forced himself to focus. He scanned the clearing, searching for anything that might give him an advantage. The fallen branch was sturdy enough, but it wouldn't last forever. He needed something else, something better. His eyes landed on a pile of rocks near the edge of the clearing. Without hesitation, began to move, keeping his body angled protectively over the cub. Each step was deliberate, calculated. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The predators watched him closely, their movements slow and deliberate as they circled him like wolves stalking their prey. Reached the rocks and bent down carefully, scooping up a handful while still holding the cub securely in one arm. It wasn't easy, but he managed. With his new arsenal in hand, faced the predators once more. "Come on then," he muttered under his breath, his voice trembling but resolute. The largest of the creatures lunged forward, its claws extended and its jaws wide open, hurled a rock with all his strength, striking it squarely between the eyes. The beast let out a pained roar and recoiled, giving just enough time to prepare for the next attack. One by one, the predators advanced, forcing to use every ounce of strength and ingenuity he possessed. He swung the branch, threw rocks, and even kicked at the creatures when they got too close. Each blow seemed to weaken them slightly, but they kept coming, relentless and unyielding. His body screamed in protest as exhaustion set in, his muscles burning with every movement. Yet he refused to give up. Every time he faltered, the cub's soft whimpers reminded him why he was fighting. In the control room, Dr. Helen Grant leaned closer to the monitors, her expression a mixture of fascination and disbelief. "This is unprecedented," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Beside her, Daniel Brooks nodded, his pen moving furiously across the pages of his notebook. "He's holding his own against multiple threats," Daniel observed. "Most subjects would have collapsed by now." Miller, who had been quietly observing the experiment from the corner of the room, stepped forward. Her brow was furrowed with concern. "Dr. Grant, isn't this going too far? Look at him. He's clearly struggling. What if he gets seriously injured?" Dr. Grant waved her off dismissively. "We're testing the limits of human protective instincts. If we don't push him, we won't get accurate data." Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Still, couldn't shake the feeling that something about this experiment was wrong. She glanced at its face on the monitor, noting the determination etched into his features. He was fighting not just for survival but for something deeper, a primal need to protect the vulnerable. Back in the clearing was reaching his breaking point. His arms felt like lead and his legs trembled beneath him. The predators had backed off momentarily, perhaps sensing his weakness. Used the brief reprieve to catch his breath, leaning against a tree for support. The cub, now finished with the milk, nestled against his chest, its small body rising and falling with each breath, rested his cheek against the top of its head, drawing comfort from its warmth. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure the cub or himself. The predators began to circle again, their glowing eyes narrowing as they prepared for another assault. Straightened up, gripping the branch tightly in his hands. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer, but he also knew he wouldn't stop fighting, not until his last breath. The first predator lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Just in time, swinging the branch with all his remaining strength. The impact sent the creature sprawling, but it quickly regained its footing and charged again. Hurled another rock, this one hitting the beast in the side. It stumbled, giving him a precious few seconds to regroup. The second predator joined the fray, leaping toward with terrifying speed. He raised the branch instinctively, blocking its attack and shoving it backward. The third creature followed suit, forcing to spin around and defend himself from multiple angles. His movements were slower now, less precise, but his resolve remained unshaken. Each time he faltered, the image of the cub's trusting eyes flashed in his mind, fueling his determination. Finally, the largest predator, the one had wounded earlier, charged forward with a deafening roar. Braced himself, knowing this was the moment that would decide everything. With a final burst of energy, he swung the branch with all his might, aiming for the creature's head. The blow landed true, knocking the beast off balance and sending it crashing to the ground. It let out a guttural cry before lying still, its glowing eyes fading into darkness. The other two predators hesitated, their confidence shaken by the defeat of their leader. Took advantage of their uncertainty, stepping forward and brandishing the branch like a weapon. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice hoarse but commanding. To his astonishment, the creatures obeyed, retreating into the shadows and disappearing from sight. Stood there for a moment, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His body ached, and his hands were raw from gripping the branch so tightly, but he had done it. Against all odds, he had protected the cub. Looking down at the tiny creature in his arms, felt a surge of pride and relief. It was still alive, still safe. That was all that mattered. As the adrenaline began to fade, sank to his knees, cradling the cub gently against his chest. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of what he had just endured wash over him. He didn't know what would come next, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The cub nuzzled against him, its tiny body radiating warmth and trust. Smiled faintly, realizing that in protecting this fragile life, he had discovered a strength within himself he never knew existed. The clearing was eerily quiet after the predators had retreated, their glowing eyes vanishing into the shadows like ghosts. Sat on the forest floor, his back pressed against a tree trunk, his body trembling with exhaustion. The cub nestled in his arms, its small form rising and falling with each breath. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but knew better than to let his guard down. His eyes darted around the edges of the clearing, searching for any sign of movement. The predators might have fled, but they could return at any moment. His hands were raw and blistered from gripping the branch, and his legs felt like jelly beneath him. Despite the pain coursing through his body, refused to release the cub or the milk bottle still clutched in his hand. Something inside him, a deep, unshakable instinct, told him that protecting these two things was more important than anything else, even if it killed him. From the tree line came a faint rustling sound, softer this time but no less ominous. His heart skipped a beat as he tightened his grip on the branch, ready to defend himself once more. But instead of another predator emerging, a new element was introduced into the simulation. The cub in his arms began to change. At first thought he was imagining it. The creature's fur seemed to shimmer, growing lighter and smoother until it resembled skin. Its tiny paws elongated into delicate fingers, and its face softened into something unmistakably human. Within moments, the cub had transformed into a young child, a girl no older than 5 years old. Her wide, frightened eyes locked onto, and she clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping the fabric of his shirt. Froze, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The cub, a child. He glanced down at her, his confusion mingling with a surge of protectiveness even stronger than before. The transformation didn't matter. What mattered was that she was still vulnerable, still depending on him. "It's okay," he murmured softly, his voice trembling. "I've got you." The rustling in the tree line grew louder, and its attention snapped back to the threat at hand. The predators hadn't given up. They were regrouping, their glowing eyes reappearing in the darkness. This time there were more of them, their massive forms prowling closer with a menacing intensity. His jaw tightened as he realized the stakes had been raised even higher. Protecting a child was infinitely more complicated and dangerous than protecting an animal. He stood slowly, keeping the girl close to his chest. She buried her face against his shoulder, her small body shaking with fear, adjusted his grip on the branch, his knuckles white from the effort. "Stay close to me," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if she understood. The predators circled them, their low growls filling the air like thunder. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. Panicking wouldn't help either of them. One of the creatures lunged suddenly, its claws slashing through the air. Swung the branch with all his strength, striking the beast squarely on the snout. It recoiled with a pained roar, giving him just enough time to step back and reassess his position. The other predators followed suit, closing in from all sides. Spun around, using the branch to keep them at bay while shielding the girl with his body. Each blow drained him further, but he refused to give in. In the control room, Dr. Helen Grant watched the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and unease. "This is extraordinary," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Beside her, Daniel Brooks scribbled notes furiously, his pen moving across the page in rapid strokes. "No subject has ever adapted so quickly to such a drastic change," he remarked. "His protective instincts are unparalleled." Miller, who had been packing nervously in the corner, stopped abruptly. Her face was pale, her hands clenched into fists. "Dr. Grant, this has gone too far," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "You're pushing him beyond his limits. What happens if he breaks? Or worse, what happens if he gets hurt because of this?" Dr. Grant turned to face her, her expression stern. "We're testing the boundaries of human nature. If we don't push, we'll never understand." Her tone left no room for argument but couldn't stay silent. "There's a difference between testing and torturing," she shot back, "and I think you've crossed that line." Before Dr. Grant could respond, one of the technicians called out urgently, "Dr. Grant, look!" Everyone turned their attention back to the monitors. On the screen was fighting with everything he had left. The predators had surrounded him completely, leaving no clear escape route. His movements were slower now, his swings weaker, but his determination remained unshaken. Every time he faltered, he glanced down at the girl in his arms, drawing strength from her presence. Back in the clearing was reaching his breaking point. His arms felt like they were made of lead, and his legs threatened to give out beneath him. One of the predators lunged forward, its claws grazing his side. Pain shot through him, but he ignored it, focusing instead on keeping the girl safe. She whimpered softly, her small hands clutching him. "It's okay," he whispered again, though his voice was hoarse and strained. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." The predators closed in, their glowing eyes narrowing as they prepared for the final assault. Braced himself, raising the branch one last time. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer, but he also knew he wouldn't stop fighting, not until his last breath. Suddenly, the largest predator, the one had wounded earlier, charged forward with a deafening roar, swung the branch with all his remaining strength, aiming for the creature's head. The impact sent the beast stumbling backward, giving just enough time to regroup. The other predators hesitated, their confidence shaken by the defeat of their leader, took advantage of their uncertainty, stepping forward and brandishing the branch like a weapon. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice hoarse but commanding. To his astonishment, the creatures obeyed, retreating into the shadows and disappearing from sight. Stood there for a moment, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His body ached and his hands were raw from gripping the branch so tightly, but he had done it. Against all odds, he had protected the girl. Looking down at her, felt a surge of pride and relief. She was still alive, still safe. That was all that mattered. As the adrenaline began to fade, sank to his knees, cradling the girl gently against his chest. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of what he had just endured wash over him. He didn't know what would come next, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The girl nuzzled against him, her tiny body radiating warmth and trust. Smiled faintly, realizing that in protecting this fragile life, he had discovered a strength within himself he never knew existed. The clearing was silent once more, the predators having retreated into the shadows. Sat on the forest floor, his body trembling with exhaustion. The girl in his arms clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. Her wide, frightened eyes darted around the clearing, searching for any sign of danger. Held her close, his arms wrapped protectively around her tiny frame. Despite the pain coursing through his body and the fatigue threatening to overwhelm him, he refused to let go. His side throbbed where one of the predator's claws had grazed him, but he ignored it. Pain was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs, and his legs were so weak that standing seemed impossible. Still, he forced himself to stay alert, his eyes scanning the tree line for any movement. The predators might have fled, but knew they could return at any moment. He wouldn't let his guard down, not while the girl depended on him. The rustling in the bushes grew louder and his heart skipped a beat. He tightened his grip on the branch, ready to defend himself once more. But instead of another predator emerging, something unexpected happened. The simulation shifted again, this time introducing a new challenge. The ground beneath began to tremble, the gentle vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. The trees swayed violently, their branches snapping and falling to the ground. A low rumble echoed through the clearing, followed by the unmistakable sound of cracking earth. His eyes widened as he realized what was happening. The ground was splitting open, forming deep fissures that spread rapidly across the clearing. Steam hissed from the cracks, and shards of rock shot up into the air like jagged teeth. Scrambled to his feet, clutching the girl tightly against his chest. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. The fissures widened, forcing him to move quickly to avoid being swallowed by the collapsing terrain. With every step, the ground crumbled beneath his feet, making it harder to find stable footing. The girl whimpered softly, burying her face against his shoulder. adjusted his grip on her, ensuring she remained secure as he navigated the increasingly unstable environment. The milk bottle, still miraculously intact, pressed against his side. Somehow, even amidst the chaos, he hadn't let it spill. In the control room, Dr. Helen Grant watched the scene unfold with a mixture of fascination and unease. "This is incredible," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the monitors. Beside her, Daniel Brooks scribbled notes furiously, his pen moving across the page in rapid strokes. "He's adapting to every challenge we throw at him," Daniel remarked. "Most subjects would have collapsed by now." Miller, who had been packing nervously in the corner, stopped abruptly. Her face was pale, her hands clenched into fists. "Dr. Grant, this is insane," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "You're putting him through hell. What happens if he breaks? Or worse, what happens if he gets hurt because of this?" Dr. Grant turned to face her, her expression stern. "We're testing the limits of human nature. If we don't push, we'll never understand." Her tone left no room for argument but couldn't stay silent. "There's a difference between testing and torturing," she shot back, "and I think you've crossed that line." Before Dr. Grant could respond, one of the technicians called out urgently, "Dr. Grant, look." Everyone turned their attention back to the monitors. On the screen was fighting not just the predators but the environment itself. The ground beneath him continued to split apart, forcing him to leap from one solid patch to another. Each jump drained him further, but his determination remained unshaken. Every time he faltered, he glanced down at the girl in his arms, drawing strength from her presence. Back in the clearing was reaching his breaking point. His legs burned with every step and his arms felt like lead. The fissures widened, closing in around him until there was almost no safe ground left. He spotted a large boulder ahead, its surface relatively stable compared to the crumbling earth around it. With a final burst of energy, lunged forward, landing hard on the boulder. The impact jarred his body, but he managed to keep his balance, holding the girl securely against his chest. The rumbling subsided slowly, the ground stabilizing as the simulation entered its next phase. Sank to his knees, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His body ached and his hands were raw from gripping the branch so tightly, but he had done it. Against all odds, he had kept the girl safe. Looking down at her, felt a surge of pride and relief. She was still alive, still safe. That was all that mattered. As the adrenaline began to fade, allowed himself a moment of peace. The girl nuzzled against him, her tiny body radiating warmth and trust. He rested his cheek against the top of her head, drawing comfort from her presence. For a brief moment, he forgot about the predators, the fissures, and the endless challenges thrown his way. All that mattered was the fragile life in his arms. But the respite was short-lived. From the tree line came the sound of growls, low, guttural, and menacing. His heart sank as he realized the predators were returning, their glowing eyes reappearing in the darkness. This time they moved with a newfound ferocity, their massive forms prowling closer with deadly intent. Tightened his grip on the branch, his jaw clenched with determination. He wouldn't let them take her. Not now, not ever. One of the creatures lunged suddenly, its claws slashing through the air. Swung the branch with all his strength, striking the beast squarely on the snout. It recoiled with a pained roar, giving him just enough time to step back and reassess his position. The other predators followed suit, closing in from all sides. Spun around, using the branch to keep them at bay while shielding the girl with his body. Each blow drained him further, but he refused to give in. Finally, the largest predator, the one had wounded earlier, charged forward with a deafening roar. Braced himself, raising the branch one last time. He knew he couldn't hold out much longer, but he also knew he wouldn't stop fighting, not until his last breath. With a final burst of energy, swung the branch with all his remaining strength, aiming for the creature's head. The impact sent the beast stumbling backward, giving just enough time to regroup. The other predators hesitated, their confidence shaken by the defeat of their leader. Took advantage of their uncertainty, stepping forward and brandishing the branch like a weapon. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice hoarse but commanding. To his astonishment, the creatures obeyed, retreating into the shadows and disappearing from sight. Stood there for a moment, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His body ached and his hands were raw from gripping the branch so tightly, but he had done it. Against all odds, he had protected the girl. Looking down at her, felt a surge of pride and relief. She was still alive, still safe. That was all that mattered. As the adrenaline began to fade, sank to his knees, cradling the girl gently against his chest. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of what he had just endured wash over him. He didn't know what would come next, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The girl nuzzled against him, her tiny body radiating warmth and trust. Smiled faintly, realizing that in protecting this fragile life, he had discovered a strength within himself he never knew existed. The clearing was eerily still after the predators had retreated for the final time. Sat on the forest floor, his body trembling with exhaustion. The girl in his arms clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. Her wide eyes darted around the clearing, searching for any sign of danger, but the tree line remained silent. For now, the immediate threat had passed. Side throbbed where the predator's claws had grazed him, and every breath felt like fire in his lungs. His legs were weak, and his arms ached from holding both the girl and the milk bottle. Despite the pain coursing through his body, he refused to let go. Protecting her had become more than just a task. It was a part of him now, something he couldn't abandon even if he wanted to. The simulation seemed to pause, as if waiting for his next move. The ground beneath him was stable again, the fissures that had split the earth earlier now frozen in place. The artificial breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and the orange glow of the simulated sunset painted the clearing in soft hues. Glanced down at the girl, her tiny face pressed against his chest. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with trust and gratitude. Smiled faintly, though his expression was tinged with sadness. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew this moment wouldn't last forever. Suddenly, the voice from the speakers crackled to life. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter, you have completed the test." The words echoed through the clearing, breaking the silence. Frowned, his grip tightening slightly on the girl. "What do you mean, completed?" he asked aloud, his voice hoarse but firm. There was no response, only the sound of machinery whirring softly in the background. Before could ask another question, the simulation began to dissolve around him. The trees faded into thin air, replaced by the cold, metallic walls of the laboratory. The ground beneath him shifted, becoming smooth and solid once more. Blinked, disoriented as the illusion of the forest disappeared entirely. He found himself standing in the middle of the chamber, the girl still cradled in his arms. But something was different. She wasn't real anymore. As stared down at her, the girl's form shimmered and dissolved, leaving behind nothing but empty air. His arms felt suddenly light, the warmth of her presence gone. Staggered backward, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. "Wait," he called out, his voice cracking with desperation. "Where is she? What did you do?" The door to the chamber opened, and Dr. Helen Grant stepped inside, followed by Daniel Brooks and Miller. Their expressions were unreadable, their faces blank masks. Turned to face them, his eyes blazing with anger and confusion. What was that thing? Was she real? His voice trembled, betraying the storm of emotions raging within him. Dr. Grant approached cautiously, her hands raised in a gesture of reassurance. "Mr. Carter, please calm down. The child was part of the simulation, a construct designed to test your protective instincts." Shook his head, disbelief etched into his features. "You mean she wasn't real? None of it was real." His voice rose with each word, his frustration boiling over. "You made me think I was protecting a living, breathing person." Stepped forward, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry. We needed to see how far human protective instincts could go. The simulation was designed to push you to your limits." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. Did you ever think about how this might affect me?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the sterile air of the laboratory. Dr. Grant hesitated, her confidence wavering slightly. This experiment was necessary. The data we collected will help us understand human behavior under extreme conditions. Data, spat the word, his tone dripping with bitterness. Is that all this was to you, just numbers on a page? He took a step closer to her, his eyes blazing with fury. That girl, real or not, felt real to me. I fought for her. I bled for her. And now you're telling me it was all a lie. Placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. We understand how you feel. What you went through was intense, maybe too intense. But you showed incredible strength and resilience. No one has ever performed like you did in this experiment. Shrugged her hand off, his body tense with anger. I don't care about your results or your experiments. All I care about is that you used me and her to satisfy your curiosity. That's not science. That's cruelty. Dr. Grant opened her mouth to respond but cut her off. She's right, said, turning to face her colleagues. This went too far. We pushed beyond what was ethical, and we need to take responsibility for that. Dr. Grant sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. Fine. If that's how you feel, then the project is over. We'll shut it down immediately. Didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked toward the exit, his steps slow and deliberate. His body ached, and his mind was heavy with everything he had endured. As he stepped out of the laboratory and into the bright lights of the corridor, he felt a strange sense of emptiness. The girl was gone, but her memory lingered, a ghost haunting the edges of his thoughts. Days later, sat alone on a park bench, watching children play on the grass nearby. Their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment of the laboratory. He held the milk bottle in his hands, its surface cool and smooth against his skin. It was the only physical reminder of what he had been through, the only proof that any of it had happened. A young girl ran past him, her hair flying behind her as she chased a butterfly. Watched her for a moment, his lips curling into a faint smile. She reminded him of the girl from the simulation, her innocence, her vulnerability. Though he knew she wasn't real, the feelings she had stirred within him were undeniably true. In protecting her, he had discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. Stood slowly, tucking the milk bottle into his bag. He didn't look back as he walked away from the park, his steps steady and purposeful. The experiment had changed him in ways he couldn't fully understand yet, but one thing was certain. He would never forget the lessons he had learned, or the girl who had taught them to him. In the control room, Dr. Grant sat alone, staring at the monitors that had once displayed every move. Beside her lay a folder containing the data collected during the experiment. She picked it up, flipping through the pages absent-mindedly. The results were groundbreaking, offering insights into human nature that no previous study had achieved. But as she read through the notes, she couldn't shake the image of his face, the anger, the betrayal, the raw emotion that had flashed in his eyes. Entered the room quietly, her expression thoughtful. "Are you okay?" she asked, taking a seat beside Dr. Grant. Dr. Grant nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the folder. "I keep thinking about what's said, that this wasn't science, it was cruelty. Maybe he's right." Placed a hand on her shoulder, her touch reassuring. "It's not too late to make things right. We can use what we've learned to create better, more ethical experiments, ones that respect the people involved." Dr. Grant closed the folder, setting it aside. "You're right. This project may be over, but our work is. We owe it to and to ourselves to do better." As the two women sat in silence, the weight of their decisions settled heavily around them. The experiment had ended, but its impact would linger for a long time to come.